Ready? Let's go! More money, more problems. A shocking true story about a strip club girl. I remember the first time I met Fabiola. She walked into the salon with a huge 1,000-watt smile. Her main feature was her oversized pearly white teeth, along with her perfectly shaped, very full lips. She strolled up to the front desk with confidence. Her eyes locked on mine. She asked if she could make an appointment for a haircut this week. Just a trim, not too much off the length, please. Her hair was incredible. It was dark brown, almost black, really healthy, super shiny, thick hair, with consistent wavy curls almost all the way down to the bottom of her back. I said, "Sure. What day do you want to come in? What's the best time for you to come into the hair salon?" The next time I saw her, she came with her 9-year-old daughter for her first hair appointment. She was a great kid, super smart and very well-mannered. She seemed older for her age. I enjoyed our time together. All three of us laughed about the stupid things we had in common. It felt like we became fast friends at that first hair salon appointment. I would see Fabiola and her daughter about every 2 months for haircuts and hair color services at the salon. A few appointments down the road, I casually asked Fabiola what she did for work. I thought it was odd that she would always be able to come in the early morning hours of the day for appointments. She admitted she worked nights, downtown at the best club in the city. She worked in a famous stripper bar selling shots, she claimed. I was like, wow, really? What's that like? I imagined in my head that it was a place filled with attractive women doing exactly what I really didn't know. I was really curious. What do club girls really do in there? What's it like to live that type of lifestyle? I didn't want to push the conversation, so I said, "Good for you, girl. Make your money." Mostly, I just said that wanting her to feel safe and not judged by me. I didn't think that was where she belonged, and I was wondering where her mom was. I couldn't help to think to myself, who in their right mind would let their daughter do that for an actual job? As time went on, we got closer and closer, exchanging stories about our past Latin lover mishaps. It was just the same old conversation most women have with each other. Boy meets girl, boy loves girl, boy promises girl the world, boy starts lying to girl, blah, blah, blah. One story stuck out. It was the story about the father of her daughter. When Fabiola was a young girl, she traveled with her family to California from Mexico for seasonal work on farms. One time she met a guy who was an American-Mexican man. He was about to join the Marines. They fell in love quickly and decided to get married when she turned 18. She had a baby with him before that got to happen. Afterwards, her husband quickly got tired of the responsibilities of having a baby, so he left one day. He never came back home, and she was really stuck in a hard place. Her mom was broke, still living full-time in Mexico with the rest of her brothers and sisters, and she was in California with no money, no job, and a baby to take care of. She didn't have anyone to really help her, and she wasn't close to anyone there. When she asked her mom what to do, her mom advised her to stay in California. Don't come back to Mexico. Go to work in the clubs. Use your body. Use your looks to make money with the rich gringo men. It's way too hard to make a living here, mija. It was a tough decision, but Fabiola listened to her mother, and she started working in bars where women stripped. She didn't like it, but she felt desperate for the quick money. She wanted to survive living in the United States, and she wanted to stay there with her baby because she thought it was the best decision. The money was great. She only worked 3 days a week, and as time went on, she got used to the environment and the routine. She had everything she needed. She had money for babysitters, and she could be with her kid during the week. It made sense, but it didn't feel like her mom had her best interest at heart when I heard that story. After all, in my eyes, she was just a kid when all this happened to her. The sad truth is, I have seen in poor Latin countries mothers often pimp out their young daughters to older men for an extra income. That sometimes is the only opportunity they think they have to help themselves. I believe this is what happened to her when she was a child, and it was continuing to happen to her in that moment when her mother gave her that bad advice. Ultimately, she only wanted her daughter to send money to her in Mexico. This way she could live more comfortably with all the other kids she had to care for. Her mother was selfish, never really considering the danger this young girl was going to be in, working late into the night with crazy drunk men who were obsessed with young, beautiful women. She could have gotten herself killed at any moment with a stalker or a serial killer. As the years went by, Fabiola would tell me all about her mother's many requests for money in passing conversations as I stood behind the chair. Often she sat for hours telling me about the past trauma and the difficulty of her life. I just felt so hurt for her. She was surviving day by day with no one to lean on, no one to guide her. I could see through each story being told she was clearly being totally manipulated by her mother. She was always on the phone with her, and she was always sorting out her mother's latest money problems. The mother would be saying she needed this because this happened, or she needed that because that happened to her. I think she was a drinker, and I think she used the money to buy alcohol. I always knew it was impossible to have that many terrible situations come up in a person's life. Honestly, her mother seemed soulless to me, like an addict, like someone who needed a fix, and she only saw Fabiola as her pretty little piggy bank and nothing more. She didn't see her as a young daughter who needed guidance and love and attention. Fabiola didn't want to constantly have to talk about money. She wanted love and care. She never received it. I hated that situation for her. I wished it would go away. I wish she knew better. I couldn't bring myself to say the truth about the stories I heard. Hey, your mom's a big fat liar and she's playing you for a fool. She doesn't seem to care about you at all, girl. Wise up. She's either doing drugs or alcohol with the money. I couldn't do that. I couldn't say that. But secretly, I always wanted to smack her with the cold hard truth. Instead, I just rolled my eyes dramatically as if to say, that's too much. I think she got the point. She got the point that I didn't like the conversation that was happening. Deep inside, she knew it was wrong what her mother was doing to her. She was manipulating her the whole time about money. I think that's why she bounced it off of me. She trusted my opinion. She wanted to see my reaction to the stories she was telling me, or the stories I heard over the phone. I understood only bits and pieces from my Spanish classes back in college. I couldn't hear everything, but it was clear to me she was a scammer in any language. Fabiola knew deep in her heart that her mother didn't care about her. She chose to believe a lie. She wanted the constant phone calls to be real, coming from a place of love, but they weren't. Rather, it was just a question about money, time frames, and exact amounts. That lady was just a woman who called herself a mother. She really wasn't a true sense of the word mother. Sadly, Fabiola never found true happiness over the years I came to know her. She seemed to have a new boyfriend every year. Each of the men she met were enamored by her beauty at first sight, but it would never last. She really was a gorgeous young lady, a triple threat: perfect face, perfect body, and perfect hair. And she also had a great sense of style. But deep down, I knew inside she was an extremely insecure, lonely little girl who badly needed and wanted a mother to care for her. She came off as a controlling type of person with the men she dated. She would quickly become a stage 5 clinger. In a few months, the guy would grow tired of it and eventually drift off, then eventually leave her, from the feeling of completely being suffocated by her. She always needed to be filled up with attention and admiration. To put it bluntly, she exhausted everyone with all of her emotional needs. She couldn't stand on her own 2 feet. She was not acting like a woman, she acted like a very young girl. It was obvious she was emotionally stunted from the trauma she endured as a child in Mexico. I knew she'd never understand why nothing ever worked out for her. I wished I could explain it all, but she was not in the right headspace to receive all that information. It didn't matter because she was so attractive to men. A week would go by and she would meet another guy, another someone new. She was so attractive to men that she didn't need to worry if she lost one. Another one would be right around the bend. My clear thinking, sober thoughts were always saying to me, all these bad situations are happening because you're not living right. What I mean is, I don't think anyone can move through life manipulating people for money and expect to have good things come your way as a result of that. It's the basic law of the universe. It's just you creating bad karma for yourself. That would be true in any religion. For example, you could see Fabiola was always dealing with being broke. Fact, she did make really great money in a few hours, a few days a week at the club, but it would be gone just as fast. She would make $1,200, and then a big part on her car would break, and it would end up costing her $1,200. Every time she made a large sum of money, she had a large bill come up right behind it. She was always struggling to get by, even though she was making close to $3,000, working only 3 days a week, mostly selling shots, she said, or whatever else the night brought her way. I'm not really sure. Let me say, Fabiola was a kind and caring person towards me. But if I were being completely honest, wouldn't you have to be a little bit of a devil to constantly keep on getting men to keep reaching into their pockets all night long, totally manipulating them into buying expensive bottles of champagne and fancy test tube drink concoctions, literally handing you every bit of money they have to their names, just to be able to keep on talking to you for a few minutes? Of course you would have to be a devil. You would definitely be a survivor who does whatever it takes to get to the next day. Even though I had figured her out by this stage, I still liked her. She was a lost soul. The way I saw it, she never had a chance. She had a bad start in life. Her only hope was herself, or that's what she thought. I knew better. I knew there was a God out there and that he could make a way for her. I told her about him. She would always look at me like I was nuts for believing in him. It was like I was talking about Santa. She made me laugh pretty hard in those moments. Fabiola was always traveling in big giant circles all throughout her life when I knew her. She was always having to start right at the very beginning all over again. She was being led astray every day from a poor example of a mother. She really had no one to talk to about making good, solid life decisions. Everyone she knew was either in the club drinking or casually doing drugs or prostituting themselves out to be able to keep a roof over their head. She never knew a single person besides me who ever really gave it to her straight. Everyone else in her life was either manipulating her, favors, or using her for money. I would always be saying, "Girl, you gotta get out of that place. I can see it's depressing you. Go to school for something. Take a new path in your life." She would say, "For what? What am I going to go to school for?" I would say, "Do nails, do hair, do something." I said that because I hated the guys she was always dating. They were all selfish liars, and they all met her in the club where she worked. I would say, "Go meet a guy outside the club, and do not tell him you work in a strip club. Give yourself a chance in the relationship. You know, if they find out you're in that environment, they aren't going to take you seriously." She would say, "You're right, but I can't lie." It was the most frustrating situation to listen to. In the end, I never got through to her. She did what she did, and she got what she got, over and over again, year after year. She never listened to a word I said, or at least it seemed that way to me. When I think about Fabiola and how depressed she slowly became over the years, when I knew her, I think about a life not really being lived out. She was a lost person who was always seeking love from outside of herself. She wanted to be loved from her manipulating mother, so she actually paid her for her love. She wanted to be loved from her boyfriends, but no one actually delivered. They just used her because they knew that they could. She had no self-worth built up inside of her. She simply didn't respect herself, and she didn't demand it from others. I couldn't help but notice she was never present in any moment. She was always getting ready for the next thing to happen to her. I would be thinking, what was going to happen to her that didn't already happen? Who did she think she was going to meet? Elvis? By this time in her life, she'd been in the best clubs in the best city on the southeast coast for 7 years. Then I realized it was a lie. It was the lie that she told herself every night to keep herself going. She lived a lie in order to cope with another day in her miserable club girl existence. That's what the devil does. He sells you a book filled with lies. He's a deceiver. When I think back about Fabiola, I think if she knew God, if she took the time to read the Bible, she would come to know the devil. He set a trap for her to fall straight into. He knows us. The devil knows exactly all about you. He knows how to take you down. He uses He used her background coming from extreme poverty in Mexico to make her think money was her king. He lured her into his web of lies with the fast money she made in the club. He gave her the promise of happiness right around the next bend. Only if she held on a little bit longer, she would get the big prize. There was never any prize. There was never going to be any happiness around the next bend. Only more compromises required of her. The devil slowly dragged her deeper and deeper into his dark world. His only goal was to lead her towards her true destiny, the destiny he designed for her. If she chose not to change her ways, she would unknowingly follow the devil's lead into her tragic, untimely death. If Fabiola stayed in the club circuit, she would eventually fall into strong drug use. From the pain of hating being in that environment that she trapped herself in. If she got out, she would naturally see some of those chains break off of her. The blinders would fall away, and she could see for herself this was not living. It was just existing for another day in the bondage of sin. In time, Fabiola and I would drift apart. She came into the salon less and less, and I was heading towards leaving the beauty industry, towards retiring. I was getting older, and the long hours on my feet were starting to get to me. I saw school in my future, a new path, a new career for myself. I don't know what ever became of Fabiola and her young daughter. I do know that she was aging out of being in the clubs by the last time that we saw each other. She was close to 30, and in the world of dance clubs, that is really ancient. The reality of the situation is, if she did stay in the club, she would probably become a full-blown working girl and a drug addict, just like all the other escort ladies she worked right alongside of. Many of her co-workers were also my salon clients. Each of them told me they only used the club to meet new Johns. When the well went dry, they ended up with a short list of obsessed older fat men who paid enormous amounts of money for a few hours of their time. They thought it was the greatest racket they schemed up, using the club to meet Johns. I saw a bunch of lost souls who were doomed to hell if they didn't turn away from that life. When I think about when Fabiola first had her issues with the guy and the baby and not having any money, I want to say there was another way. She didn't know it at the time because she didn't know the system here in America, but she could have called the sergeant in the Marines where her husband worked. She could have got him trouble. She could have got his wages garnished for child support. She could have had the security of a roof over her head. She could have applied for welfare, food stamps, housing. She could have gone to a women's shelter. They would have assisted her with instant job training to help her. They could have provided her with daycare. In other words, she would have been able to make a way for herself without having to become a girl who works in a club, a strip club. It was the fast money and the lure of freedom that attracted her, really, along with the awful advice from someone who she thought really cared about her well-being. And the shocking truth is, nobody cared about Fabiola, not even her own mother. Life coach lesson number 2. Fabiola had a painful journey struggling through life. I only saw her agony and self-hatred each time we met. These were all lies that the enemy told her. Each day, he wanted her to believe that. They were never true. But once the enemy has your mind, the body will follow. It didn't have to go that way for her. She could have been set free from the constant chaos in her life. and the addiction of alluring men for money, that was a curse, and it could have been broken off of her through a personal relationship with Jesus. When I think about Fabiola, I pray that she comes to know God, her Father in heaven, one day. That is someone she would always be able to count on. He loves her and he will never leave her. Know that God is good and the devil is a liar.